today's topic is understanding the key differences in roles and careers prospects when it comes to ISO lead auditor and ISO lead implementer. So that will remain our main focus area in today's discussion. Uh, I'll share whatever I have learned in my career as an operations person, as well as an implementer and as an auditor. I played all the three roles. So without any further delay, let's start. So this would be a session which would be aiming at learning together. So the topic of today's session is ISO LA versus LI. LA stands for lead auditor and LI stands for lead implementer. What are the key differences in their roles? And obviously once you understand the differences in the roles, it becomes much easier to understand the career prospects as well. So what is an ISO? ISO is an international body. It is not an acronym, rather, it is a short name indicating the name of the organization, which is International Organization for Standardization. So, this is a non for profit organization which acts like a worldwide federation of national standards bodies. Now, just to give you an idea, in India, we have our national standard body as Bureau of Indian Standards. In US, it is NIST. In UK, it is BIS. Likewise, every country has got their own national standard body, and the membership of ISO is offered to all the countries across the globe, whosoever wishes to become a member, but the representation of that country will be by their national standards body only, which means India is represented in ISO through its Bureau of Indian Standards. Now, this organization has been working since 1947, has been developing a lot many international standards through their technical committees. The idea is to bring across a uniform or a universal approach and a framework which can be established, implemented, maintained by any organization, irrespective of their size, irrespective of their sector, whether governmental or non-governmental, a small organization which is a proprietorship having a single owner, or a large corporate or a public limited company, or an organization which has got a global footprint, whether it is into manufacturing or it is into ITES services, or is it into oil and gas sector, or is it into consulting or into finance or banking or insurance. Any organization can actually adopt ISO management systems and then create their own policies and procedures to meet those requirements. Along with ISO, there is another international body which is International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC. Many of the standards specifically related to information security are jointly developed by ISO and IEC. And that is the reason on some standards you will find the name as ISO/IEC. So whenever you find a name as ISO/IEC on any of the ISO standards, it is an indication that this standard was developed as a joint work of two organizations. Till date, more than 24,000 standards have been developed. Mostly these standards are divided into two broad categories. So one category is requirements and another category is guidance or guidelines, recommendations, and if they wish, they can follow that. It is their prerogative. And for the guideline standards, there is no certification. So as I was saying, for the there are two types of standards. One are requirements standards. Other are guidelines standard. So for guideline standards, there is no certification for organization. However, people can get certified. Personal certification is possible. On the other hand, the requirement standards, they are the standards which give requirements, and organizations can get certified, and even personnel can also get certified. So these are the two types of the standards. Now just to give one example, requirements standards which can be certified. ISO 9001 quality management system, ISO 27001 information security management system, ISO 22301 business continuity management system. All these are requirement standards. On the guidelines, we have ISO 31000 related to risk management. It is not a certifiable standard, it provides framework for risk management. Then there is ISO 27002, which provides guidance on information security controls. Again, it's a guidance standard, not certifiable. So this is a major difference. So now we'll go straight away to ISO IEC 27001 2022. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this standard has been developed jointly by ISO and IEC. The latest edition was published in October 2022, and that is the reason you find this. So earlier, this standard was 27001 2013, and the first time when it was published, it was 27001 2007. Now, every 5 years, there is a systematic review of each standard by ISO committees to look into the standards adequacy and suitability to current times. So if the committee feels that no, there is a need, some changes have happened and those changes need to be incorporated in the standard goes through a review process. If there is a voting mechanism at multiple stages in the development of the standard, and if everybody approves, then the final standard is republished. So ISO 27001 2007 was reviewed in 2012 and we got 2013. So this review happened in 2012. Then a review happened in 2018 and we got 2022 standard. On the other hand, ISO 9001 2015 quality management system, it was reviewed in 2016, found still adequate and suitable. So no changes. It was again reviewed in 2021. Again, the committee decision was it is adequate and suitable even to the current times. So even though it is a 2015 standard, it is still valid. So next review will happen in 2026. There may be a change, there may not be a change. Now this particular standard ISO 27001 2022 is the standard for information security, cyber security and privacy protection. This standard provides a framework and requirements for information security management systems for any organization. ISO IC 27001:2022 is a certifiable management system because it is a requirement standard. So organizations can implement their ISMS fulfilling its requirements and get certified. The standard promotes a process approach, PDCA based, plan, do, check, act, and go back to the planning stage, improve your plan, improve your operations, still monitor, still identify the gaps, still take corrective actions, and then again go back. So this is an ongoing cycle. That is the approach. And when this cycle is taken by any organization, it leads to continual improvement. And this standard is based on a risk based strategy for information security. That is at the core of this standard. So this standard requires that every organization need to identify where there could be a risk to their information security and then take adequate controls, mitigate that. So a brief introduction to ISMS. First of all, every organization, even a shopkeeper outside your home or residential area, even that shopkeeper is collecting, processing, storing, and transmitting information. And the large organizations, banks, for example, telecom operators like Airtel, Jio, Vodafone, all of them are collecting, processing, storing, and transmitting information. All organizations, different types, different sizes, they recognize that information and related processes, related systems, related networks, and of course people, all are important assets for achieving organization objectives. But at the same time, all organizations face a range of risks, and these risks may affect the functioning of these assets. So, what do the organizations do? They address their perceived risk exposure by implementing information security controls. And these controls are part of overall information security management system. So, in nutshell, all information which is held and processed by any organization is subject to threats of attack, threats of error, or threats of nature, natural disasters, flood, fire, etc. And it is also subjected to the vulnerabilities which are inherent in its use. Vulnerabilities indicate weaknesses in the system. Lack of processes, lack of skilled people, all those would be vulnerabilities. So, what is ISMS? ISMS is a framework. So, this is a framework wherein protecting information assets through defining, achieving, maintaining, and improving information security effectively will become essential to enable an organization to achieve its objectives, to maintain and enhance its legal compliances and image. So these coordinated activities which are directing the implementation of suitable controls, treating unacceptable risks are known as elements of information security management. So when it comes to defining an ISMS, we may say that an ISMS, Information Security Management System, will consist of policies, procedures, guidelines, and of course associated resources and activities, which are collectively managed by an organization pursuing the protection of its information assets. So an ISMS will be a systematic approach for establishing, then implementing and operating, then throughout monitoring, reviewing, and maintaining and improving an organization's information security to achieve business objectives. So if you look at each one of these words, establishing is plan, implement and operate is do, monitoring and reviewing is check, and maintaining and improving is act. So then it's a systematic PDCA approach when it comes to managing the information security. And this can happen only and only when the organization focuses on risk assessment. Organization defines its risk acceptance levels and then effectively treat and manage the risks which are identified. So ISMS will include analyzing the requirements for the protection of information assets and then applying the appropriate controls to ensure the protection of these information assets as required and contributes to the successful implementation of an ISMS. And where do we need protection? We need protection against breaches. Breaches to confidentiality, breaches to integrity of information, breaches to availability of information, breaches to privacy protection. So we need an information security management systems to enable our organizations to minimize the impact of such breaches and as far as possible avoid such breaches. In case a breach happens, how to manage these breaches. So to give you an overview of the standard itself, the ISO IEC standard 27001-2022 has got two parts. Part 1 is clauses and part 2 is information security controls. So clauses are the main standard components. There are 7 clauses. The implementable and auditable clauses start from clause 4, context of organization, followed by clause leadership, then planning, then support, then operation, then performance evaluation, and then improvement. Information security controls are covered in an annexure under the name Annex A. Now this annexure follows 4 themes, and in these 4 themes there are total 93 controls. So theme 5 is organizational controls. There are 37 controls which are categorized as organizational. Theme 6 is people controls. 8 controls are there. Theme 7 is physical controls. 14 controls are there. Theme 8 is technological control. 34 controls are there. Now all the controls which are related to humans are people controls. All the controls which are related to the physical aspect, maybe a building, workstation areas, data centers, or all other areas, entries, exits, fire protection, all these are physical controls. The controls where the processes make use of technology like access controls, network monitoring, etc. Those controls are technological controls. And any other control is an organization control, starting with policies, procedures. Now, the clauses in this standard for certification point of view, all clauses are mandatory requirements. There is no exception in this case. And the organizations need to implement all the clauses, including all sub clauses. Organizations need to maintain or retain evidence of implementation that would be looked into by the auditors whenever the certification audit happens. And the information security controls given in Annex A, the 93 controls, it is not necessary to implement all the 93 controls. Some organization may implement only 81 out of 93. Another organization may implement only 90 out of 93 or 76 out of 93. What is required by the organizations in one of the clauses, clause 6, the clause for planning, this requires that organization should produce a statement of applicability, commonly known as SOA document. Now, the statement of applicability document will identify what all controls will be required to be implemented as a part of the risk treatment in that organization. So, all these controls are normative reference as a means to mitigate to the risks of information security, cyber security, and privacy protection. So let us first talk about implementation and later on we'll talk about audit. Now, the principles on your screen are the fundamental principles which will contribute to the successful implementation of an information security management system. Starting with awareness of the need for information security. And this is awareness not by the organization, rather awareness of all those working under control of organization. That could be employees, that could be contractor staff, that could be vendors, suppliers. Anyone who's working under the control of an organization need to be aware of the need for information security. Another factor in the implementation is assignment of responsibility for information security within the organization. And then incorporating the management commitment. This is part of clause 5, leadership clause. So incorporating the management commitment and also incorporating the interest of stakeholders. Enhancing an organization's societal values. Then risk assessments, determining the appropriate controls to reach acceptable level of risk, means risk mitigation. Security being incorporated as an essential element of information networks and systems, which means security by design and default. There should be an active prevention and detection of information security incidents, which means the organization should not develop and implement incident management process. Ensuring a comprehensive approach to the information security management and focusing on continual reassessment of information security, and wherever required, make the modifications, improve, make changes wherever required. So just give me a heads up. Are we clear on the fundamental principles of implementation? Okay. So lead implementer's role. Now, a lead implementer in an organization will act like a project manager of implementation of ISMS. Implementation of any system is actually a project. So the lead implementer's roles is like a project manager for the implementation of information security management system. The major responsibilities for a lead implementer will include development of information security policy. Please remember, development. Lead implementer is not authorized to sign and roll out the policy. But lead implementer would be working in that organization to develop an information security policy which will be duly aligned to the organization's strategic and business objectives. And he is responsible to get the approval from leadership, top management. Lead implementer is also responsible for development of information security objectives. For this, being a project manager, that person will need to consult the respective risk owners, departmental heads, and then define the information security objectives, which would again be approved by the leadership or top management. Lead implementer would be involved in development of the risk assessment process in that organization. Directives will come from the top management on risk acceptance levels and criteria. And once the risk assessment process has been defined, developed, rolled out, the lead implementer will conduct the risk assessment in consultation with respective HODs, function heads, process owners, etc., who would eventually be the risk owners also. Lead implementer would also be responsible to produce that statement of applicability we just talked about in the previous slide, and then develop the risk treatment plans in consultation with the risk owners. He or she also needs to ensure approval of the residual risks from the risk owners, because every risk cannot be 100% mitigated. Even after putting in a control, there may be some residual risk. So the standard requires that the risk owners should approve the residual risk, and the lead implementer would be playing a role there in getting those approvals. Further, the lead implementer will also support various functions to embed information security controls which have been agreed upon as per statement of applicability within their respective processes. So HR function would be implementing people controls. Operations team would be looking into technological, IT would be looking into technological controls. Facilities operation will look into implementation of physical controls. Top management, HODs, and other process owners would be implementing the organizational controls. And lead implementer would be supporting these people to relook into their existing policies, procedures, and embed these respective controls in their processes, again by design and by default. Further, the lead implementer will also facilitate internal audits of ISMS, and here we collaborate with internal audit function of that organization. Once the audit is done, there might be non-conformances. So lead implementer will support various functions to identify the root causes of these non-conformities which were identified during an audit, and then develop the corrections and corrective action plans. Now, lead implementer is not responsible for implementing the corrective action plans. Implementation of the corrective action plans is the responsibility of the respective function. But yes, lead implementer supports in developing those corrective action plans in consultation with them only. And it is his or her responsibility to ensure implementation of these corrective action plans. So overall, a lead implementer is responsible for maintaining a healthy information security management system for the organization. Okay, now let us look into auditing of ISMS. First and foremost, internal audits of ISMS is a mandatory requirement in the standard ISO IC 27001:2022. There is a clause 9 which is on performance evaluation, which has a sub clause 9.2 with the title internal audit. According to this clause, an organization shall conduct internal audits of its implemented and maintained ISMS at planned intervals, maybe every 3 months, maybe every 6 months, maybe every 12 months. Organizations decide. ISO standard says planned intervals. It does not specify the period. So when there is a requirement of an internal audit, first and foremost, let us understand what is an audit. So audit is a systematic, independent and documented process for obtaining audit evidence and then evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which the audit criteria are fulfilled. So what is audit criteria now? Audit criteria is the set of policies, procedures or requirements which are used as a reference against which the audit evidence will be compared. So now, as an auditor, we gather information which becomes an evidence. Now we look for, is this evidence fulfilling the requirement or not? Just to take an example, there is a requirement in the standard risk assessment process to be established. So as an auditor, we would be looking at, is that organization having a documented risk assessment process or not? Then there is another requirement, conduct risk assessments. Now, risk assessment process is a requirement under clause 6. Conducting risk assessment is a requirement under clause 8, do part of PDCA. So we will be looking at risk assessment reports. So the risk assessment report will be an audit evidence. And the criteria would be that particular clause which requires that the risk assessment to be conducted. The risk assessment process or procedure will be an evidence. And the criteria would be clause 6 requirement. So ISO IC 27001:2022 as a standard and organization's own documented ISMS will be considered as audit criteria for any ISMS audit. So the role of the lead auditor in any organization, first and foremost, let us understand a lead auditor can be an internal auditor for an organization or it can be an external auditor also. Now, as an external auditor also, you might be performing audit of ISMS in the capacity of internal auditor only. That would be the scenario where the organization, maybe a small organization, is not having in-house capability for auditing its management system. So it goes out and hires and contracts an external resource having those capability, a qualified lead auditor, to act like an internal auditor for their own internal audits. And external auditor may also represent a management systems conformity assessment body. Commonly we call them as certification bodies or CBs. For example, BSI, TOFSOD, Intertech, Bureau Veritas, DNV, DQS. There's a long list. All these are accredited certification bodies. Now, for auditing, there is another ISO standard which provides guidelines for auditing management systems. And this standard includes principles of auditing, managing an audit program in an organization, conducting an audit, and competence and evaluation of auditors. So, all these guidelines are provided in all audits, whether internal auditors, external auditors, or certification body auditors, need to follow these guidelines. So the 7 principles of auditing as given in ISO 19011 include principle of integrity, which is the foundation of professionalism. Principle of fair presentation, which is the obligation to report truthfully and accurately. Principle of due professional care, which is application of diligence and judgment in auditing. Principle of confidentiality, which is security of information. As an auditor, we come across a lot of information which is confidential to our auditee. So we need to maintain the principle of confidentiality. Principle of independence, which will become the basis for impartiality of the audit and objectivity of the audit conclusions. There should be no conflict of interest, no bias of the auditor towards auditing. And then the principle of evidence-based approach means the rational method for reaching reliable and reproducible audit conclusions in a systematic audit process. Every audit finding to be supported by an evidence. And then taking the risk-based approach for auditing. An audit approach considering the risks and opportunities means higher risk areas to be paid more attention to. So, a lead auditor will either conduct audits of ISMS single-handedly as an individual contributor or will lead a team of auditors. In any audit where there are more than one auditors involved, it is a mandatory requirement that those auditors must be led by a team leader, and that team leader would be lead auditor. So the major responsibilities of a lead auditor will include planning an audit to start with, then conducting the audit. And conducting the audit will include collecting the information which will serve as evidences, evaluating each evidence against audit criteria to get an audit finding, then evaluating all audit findings to reach an objective audit conclusion. And finally, the end product of an audit will be audit report. It is the responsibility of the lead auditor to prepare and submit an audit report, even if there are 3 auditors involved, 4 auditors involved, 7 auditors involved. The responsibility of preparation and submission of an audit report always lies with the lead auditor. Now the question arises, is it required to be an ISMS implementer before you become an ISMS auditor? Answer to this question is no. These are two different roles. However, it may be beneficial for an auditor if he or she has experience in implementation, but it is not a prerequisite to become an auditor. So anybody can pick up a certification program and develop the skills as an auditor without going through the certification of implementer. And anybody can pick up an implementer certification if they do not want to go for auditing at this stage. And now the final question, who hires whom? So the lead auditors will be hired by all organizations which are seeking to preserve information security, irrespective of the size or sector. Why? Because internal audit is a mandatory requirement, which means every single organization who is either seeking a certification or is already certified will need a lead auditor. And these auditors are also hired by the certification bodies to conduct ISMS assessment audits for their client organizations, which approach them to get certified. On the other hand, the lead implementer will again be hired by all organizations which are seeking to preserve information security, again, irrespective of size or sector. And to preserve information security, they need to implement information security management system. So they need skilled people. Otherwise, in an organization, there are finance people, admin people, HR people, IT person, sales, marketing. But they need a person who has the knowledge about information security to implement the information security requirements across all functions. So they need a qualified lead implementer. Lead implementers are also hired by consulting organizations who help others organization in implementing ISMS. So whether it is PwC, EY, or any other consulting organization, they might be looking at both lead implementer as well as lead auditors. So this is the major difference. This session was useful to you people. It gave you at least some